Watching Blackrock. I mean, all right, let's see. Let's see the video then.
I'm standing in front of the headquarters of a company that manages $10.6 trillion. That's more
Damn.
than half the United States GDP. Last time I covered the
I mean, I know Blackrock. I know it. I know what it is, what they do. I know how deep involved are into basically the whole stock market, right? But I mean, it is pretty clear that behind BlackRock there is not only, I mean, somebody has to invest in BlackRock, right? So BlackRock is a publicly listed company, and I have stocks in BlackRock too. So I'm feeding in a way the beast, right? The thing is that I am, of course, like a very insignificant part of BlackRock, but there are who owns BlackRock? I have no idea. But BlackRock, by proxy, owns everything else. You know, I guess they will talk
shady
about it.
consulting group McKinsey, and you guys asked for one thing: BlackRock.
Vanguard, I
So
think,
here we
right?
are. BlackRock is the subject of a lot of speculation online.
There is a robot that controls more wealth than any country on earth.
Really, the commander-in-chief is Larry Fink.
They have stock in 95% of Fortune 500
No, I don't think it's Larry Fink, which is the CEO of BlackRock. I don't think he is the one who's pulling the strings. I think he's the investors in BlackRock who pull the strings. Like BlackRock is the face of someone who owns BlackRock, for sure. But do we know it? If I remember correctly, and don't quote me on this, is Vanguard. So Vanguard owns, or like the investors of Vanguard owns BlackRock, and Vanguard is one of those companies who doesn't have to disclose who's the owner of the company, if I remember correctly, or who's part of it.
companies, and they've been hired by governments across the world to help manage financial crises and even just conduct
Don't quote
normal
me on that.
operations. That means that pretty much any time you interact with the economy, working, buying stuff, driving a car, going to the bank, anything, you're interacting with BlackRock.
Yeah.
But that $10.6 trillion isn't really their money. Don't worry, we'll come back to that. And they claim they're just passive investors, which seems harmless, right? While I love a good conspiracy, and I know there was a cornucopia on the fruit of
This is what I'm saying. Passive investors are just people who own stocks in a company, and you can actually work as a majority. So you can be a minority investor, but working as a majority investor, if other companies who you align with, I give an example. Vanguard is a separate company from BlackRock, but if BlackRock and Vanguard, who basically own each other in a certain degree, own a third company, those two percentages, so let's say BlackRock owns 11%, the other one, Vanguard, owns another 15% in a determined company, both of them together is 25-26%, and they have a majority in the company.
the Loom logo. How much of a conspiracy is this really? I wanted to get to the truth behind BlackRock and the other nearly identical asset managers, State Street and Vanguard, known as the Big Three. Are they actively controlling the world and shaping it in their favor?
Yeah.
Or are they passive investors just riding the wave of American economic expansion?
No, I can assure you no.
Stay with me. We'll get to the spooky stuff soon, but first let's talk through some finance basics that give BlackRock their power. What an asset manager actually does, the main product they provide, index funds, their favorite loophole, passivity, and their position in our economy, the not at all terrifying sounding universal ownership. BlackRock is an asset manager, and the service they offer is taking a customer's money and making more money out of it. Their existence relies upon an important invention of the 70s.
This one bed's only $119.
Okay, this is though not true. I mean, I guess she will go on and probably explain it too, but you are not a passive investor if you own assets in a specific company.
More exciting,
You pretended
the
to be.
index fund. It was pioneered by the first CEO of Vanguard, and it offers investors a way to invest in
Look at the
many stocks
face.
at once. So instead of
Why do they always look like this? Like, why would you always look like them and you will say, holy shit, that looks like a lizard?
betting a lot on a few individual companies, you bet a little bit on every company in the whole index, basically just the whole market itself.
The index at least steers a steady course.
It's like instead of betting on a single horse, you're betting on all the horses at once. And index funds are a form of mutual fund, the more general way people pool their money together to make big investments. But someone needs to be the one to pool all that money together and manage it, and that's an asset manager, i.e. Blackrock. Index funds and ETFs are their main products, and they're pretty similar. They're popular because they're lower risk, have more consistent returns, and are cheaper for asset managers because they don't have to pay a guy to place bets all day, which studies show they are not very good at.
Just ignore the folly of short-term speculation. It's absolutely a loser's game.
So if the market is up 7% today, so is your index fund. Instead of constantly buying and selling shares, which is what active investors do, BlackRock and these big asset managers buy a little bit of every company and just hold on to those shares basically indefinitely. This is called passive investing, a title that affords them a lot of legal leeway they otherwise wouldn't get.
And ladies and gentlemen, I am one.
They own so much that it would be impossible for them to sell out of any one stock in one fell swoop.
When you think about passive, we can't sell a company as long as they're in the index.
Most of the money asset managers manage comes from institutional investors. Those are big pension funds, insurance companies, nonprofits, and university endowments. But while all the money they manage is in the hands of these big institutions, most of it actually comes from regular people. Public and private pension plans, 401k owners, college tuition, and anyone with insurance. This is your money, but it doesn't always come back to you.
No.
Nor do you get a say in the companies it gets invested in. While they want good returns on those investments, contrary to how we think about Wolf of Wall Street type investors, that's not actually their main goal. They make their profits from the fees they charge their clients, not from the returns on the money they invest. I spoke with Benjamin Braun, a professor of political economy at the London School of Economics. He's written a bunch of studies on asset managers' role in our economy and society.
The fees you earn if you're BlackRock increase when the market value of the assets you manage increases. You maximize your assets under management by winning over new clients and by getting the clients that you already have to give you more money.
When you have $10 trillion, you have to put them somewhere, and eventually that somewhere becomes everywhere.
Universal ownership refers to holding shares in the entire universe of firms listed on the stock market. The big three asset managers, BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, hold a sizable, but still relatively small stake in all listed corporations.
BlackRock is a 3 to 10% shareholder in all of these companies. This may not sound like a lot, but it's enough that selling all of it at once would likely crash that entire stock, kind of locking them into the whole not selling passive thing.
5% in any individual company is actually very significant because if and when shareholdership is dispersed, 5% makes you, in all likelihood, the single largest shareholder in that company. That's why, for example, in a lot of academic studies, 5% is taken as a threshold for control.
But this is what I was saying before, right? So I was saying this before. You own a small percentage of it, but you own it together with other people that you know.
Almost no difference between Vanguard, BlackRock, State Street, and even a bunch of other asset managers in terms of their business model. So then you can start and wonder, okay, so if the big three together hold 25% of the shares in any individual company, then you're definitely...
BlackRock owns 5%, Vanguard owns 5%, State Street, whatever it is, owns another 5%, is already 15%. And I'm telling you, they don't own 5%, they usually own 7-8. Mix them all together, you have your majority stakeholders who will take the decision for the company.
Let's zoom in on Amazon. The big three...
And then they will tell you that they have big insights inside of that market. Of course, it's because they control everything. So the insights come from the fact that you own a small share, which is actually a majority share in every company. And you have,
all outstanding Amazon shares.
Know what they're
Jeff
doing.
Bezos only owns 9%.
See?
In theory, universal owners should have an interest in maximizing profits in the long term across the entire economy.
Didn't pre-watch
and that
it.
is not how they operate in practice.
The amount of stock you have determines the number of votes you get. BlackRock is almost always in the top 3, maybe 5 if they're feeling broke. So that is a lot of votes. And let's not forget, it's not BlackRock's money that's invested. It's your dad's pension fund and your insurer's massive pile of savings. It sounds crazy, but when you put your money in a pension fund, you sign away your voting rights to the pension fund manager. And then when the pension fund manager puts all their pension funds under an asset manager's control, they sign away all those votes to the asset manager. Kind of pyramid scheme vibes. And how do they actually use those votes? A 2017 study found that asset managers almost always voted with what the company executives recommended. And why are they always voting with company management? Back in the 80s, company managers used to spend company money on company things, like corporate jets, fancy offices, or occasionally paying their employees. And this made the investors sad because they wanted those profits. So they started offering company managers, in addition to bonuses and benefits, stock options. Executives' total pay was now forever tied to how much the company made.
They can push managers, corporate managers, to act more in the interest of shareholders, meaning in the interest of corporate profits, and do more to maximize corporate profits.
This funnels money back to investors who now include management and away from any hope of making companies work better or including employees in the profits that their labor created.
No, because they don't give a shit about you. They don't get corporations don't. I never understood why those people on LinkedIn or wherever it was, they always pushed the idea, we work for the best company in the world. Basically, LinkedIn is a market. It's like slaves saying, we're so happy to be slaves.
Back in the day, like my grandparents' day, more
And
regular
of course, the slave owner then seeing that will say, see, they're all happy.
people had stocks, and the idea
But then
was that
everybody
every
wants to kill
shareholder could
itself.
vote on things like board elections, mergers and acquisitions, executive compensation, and once in a while, wages. Sort of like democracy for people with disposable income.
Government is the people's business, and every man, woman, and child becomes a shareholder with the first penny of tax paid.
In 1945, 94% of stocks were owned by households, but that's not really how it works anymore. Today, households are more like 40% of the stock market, and about half of that belongs to the top 10%.
Okay. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Today, the top 1% own 50% of corporate equity and mutual fund shares, while the top 10% own 86%. Did you think this yellow part was everyone else? Nope. The tiny green part on the bottom is the least wealthy half of Americans.
You often hear this argument that what is good for shareholders is good for everyone because, especially in the US, where retirement assets are overwhelmingly invested in corporate equities, everyone is a shareholder. But that's simply not true. The bottom 50% virtually owns no shares at all. The vast majority of shares are held by the top 10%. And within that, even shareholdings are quite concentrated within the top 1%.
And while the strategies corporations choose because asset managers vote for them affect everyone, they only benefit half the population even a little bit and frequently hurt the other half, those without any shares at all. Take the example of worker pay. BlackRock and other asset managers play a huge part in wage stagnation.
If you're a corporation, you can increase profits only in so many ways, and you can always, in the short term, increase returns to shareholders by squeezing workers.
So this kind of uber monopolization really hurts.
But again, this is because a lot of people don't unionize, they don't put themselves together with the others, because those people, not BlackRock in particular, BlackRock of course is pulling the strings, or whoever, right? BlackRock, Vanguard, and so on, or anyway, large hedge funds are pulling the strings of politicians who put you one against the other. And you fall for it because you're fucking stupid, like 99% of the people that you're surrounded with. So when you go to vote, you will vote for the same fucking faces over and over again who will pull this same trick onto you. And you will say when you are at work, that person is a conservative, that person is a liberal, so fuck them. So if you see that they are struggling, you're happy that they are because they deserve it. You know, like a lot of conservatives will say, yeah, because those fucking liberals don't want to work and blah, blah, blah. They want to work at 9 to 5. And the liberals will say, those fucking racists, I hope they die. So, you know, both of you are fucking stupid, but you don't realize it. And, you know, keeping you in this constant state of war between classes, or between people, or between different parties, make you feel like you are always threatened, always, and you don't unionize, you don't put yourself together, you don't vote them out. they know how to control you. They have been doing this for years and they are much better than you because they instead work together and make profit.
Working
the only
people,
one who does.
consumers, and even small businesses. And this is where it gets interesting.
Write it on
There's
LinkedIn.
evidence that this type of universal ownership is in part responsible for why everything is so expensive these days. For example, they have significant stakes in Nike, Adidas, Lululemon, and Under Armour. If one outperforms the other, it's the same from BlackRock's point of view.
Yeah.
And sometimes it can even lose investors' money altogether if companies were to start lowering prices to compete.
Yeah.
That's the universal ownership logic in action, but it's also an anti-competitive logic in action. The fact that all 5 airlines, all the major banks, for example, in the US have the same large shareholders creates a danger and a risk that these corporations will not engage in competition in the same way they would if they each had different shareholders. Because in that world, each shareholder would root for their company and would hope to outperform the market by the company they waged a bet on.
It's sort of like a neo-monopoly where companies don't even have to merge and buy each other
And keep in mind, monopolies should be banned technically by law.
Anymore
to
because
avoid
they
this.
all send profits to the same guys
how
no matter
to
what.
work around it.
And their large stakes in basically every company affords them friends in high places. From just 2014 to 2015, BlackRock performed over 1,500 private engagements with the companies held in their portfolio. BlackRock reportedly believes that meetings behind closed doors can go further than votes against management, and they typically give management a year before voting against them. They also have a lot of friends in the government. There's a sort of revolving door between BlackRock, the government, and the international bodies that create monetary policy. Things like the US Treasury, Federal Reserve, the central banks of Canada, some European countries, and Sweden, as well as the International Monetary Fund and the World Economic Forum. Since 2004, BlackRock has hired at least 84 former government officials, regulators, and central bankers worldwide.
The intersection of politics and business has never been more ongoing.
Larry Fink himself is on the board of the WEF and even tried to get himself selected as Hillary Clinton's Treasury Secretary in 2016. And in 2008, they got themselves a pretty sweet deal.
I mean, not to say that this World Economic Forum didn't have already his own share of, let's say, conspiracy theories.
Traders saying this is the craziest day they have ever seen in these markets. Veteran traders saying they've never seen anything like it.
In the aftermath, the government created the Financial Stability Oversight Council to oversee entities like BlackRock that control a lot of money but aren't banks. The FSOC pointed to BlackRock as an organization that's so big that its failure could cause another collapse, and tried to put additional oversight on them. But BlackRock doubled their political lobbying spending, including running a super targeted ad campaign on the DC Metro, and managed to dodge the oversight that other large financial institutions receive. And let's come back to that loophole they like to call passivity. The people who decide if they're passive enough to continue not to be overseen by the government is BlackRock themselves. Basically, BlackRock and other asset managers have to submit annual letters to self-certify that they've been compliant with the terms of passive investment. That's like being allowed to write whatever you want on your taxes and then audit yourself. Except if you also had $10 trillion, which, unless you're watching this and you're literally Larry Fink, hey bestie, I'm gonna safely assume you don't. The part that really blows my mind is that while this one company already has their eggs in basically every basket and is making money off seemingly everyone, it goes even deeper than that. The biggest investors in BlackRock are Vanguard and State Street.
That's what I was saying.
And the biggest investors in Vanguard are BlackRock and State Street.
That's what I was saying.
And the biggest investors in State Street are, you guessed it, BlackRock and Vanguard.
Asset managers are the shareholders of asset managers. And this is true for all financial firms, and not only, in fact, for stock market listed firms, but private equity firms buying up private insurers.
So the financial sector effectively owns itself. The biggest companies that they own them back, creating this loop that sucks money in and never seems to spit it back out. They play all sides of the game because at a certain point, you can't lose when you play against yourself. So going back to our original questions, does BlackRock own everything? No. But do they control everything? Kinda. They profit off of every bit of your life while controlling just the minimum amount they need to make sure they can continue profiting off of every bit of your life. And they get paid by teachers' retirement funds to do it. And they get away with this by constantly exchanging money for power and utilizing legal loopholes. It's worth being pedantic here for a second. They don't own everything. They own shares in everything, which gives them an outsized amount of control. So while they're not necessarily the ones making all the nitty-gritty...
Yeah, they own everything. Yeah, they do. They do, and they do it with their friends who also own everything, with their friends who also own everything. So they do own everything.
Decisions in every
It's that
company,
simple.
it is their influence and this giant structure of universal ownership that continues to make their pie bigger and ours smaller. It's the ultimate endgame of the Investor Management Alliance. Remember the part about how they're responsible for reporting their own passivity to the government? The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and the FDIC are working to change that and make it so that asset managers that own large chunks of banks like Blackrock are regulated like banks. The asset managers, of course, are not happy, and they are lobbying against this. So regulating them much further is going to prove difficult, and this is a solution to one part of a much larger problem. We no longer have the old system of shareholder democracy. We have something more like a shareholder oligarchy where the people with the most power over where our money and stuff goes are incentivized to make that stuff worse and more expensive and not work for us. But BlackRock didn't create this system, they just used it to their advantage. Yeah. And I think we deserve a better one, where the people who create the wealth have a say in where it goes.
Yeah, for sure.
Thanks for watching The Classroom, where control...
You see, the problem here is also that people like, again, our generations don't really care about these things as long as they can receive 1,000 likes on Facebook or Instagram or wherever, which is owned by those companies anyway. And they put one against each other. We fall for it. We don't care. Politicians basically are lobbied by those people, so basically controlled by those people. We have no saying in anything, and it will continue to be like this because we're stupid enough to believe that. In the times of my father, if something like this was, first of all, you have to understand, in Europe, the presence of the other half, so communists and socialists, made it so that you had always a counterbalance to capitalism. Now that capitalism won, basically you have unbound capitalism that can use itself to do, again, owning itself, as she was saying. They can own each other. Capitalism doesn't have to show any more the good face because there is no counterpart to capitalism. So capitalism owns itself and tries to make itself better by owning itself. It is not, there is no balance. There is no balance of power. The only system now is one, and is the main system that we already live, the whole world lives under it. There are people who say that fucking China doesn't live under it, which is a state capitalist system, but it's still capitalist. So it's a system that has existed. Capitalism is like a birth child of medieval Europe, and before that, medieval servant mentality and feudalism. So it already existed forever. It's a natural evolution of that. Anyway, I enjoyed the video.